Today I'm going to test a few games on Linux on ARM using this Thelio Astra computer running Crossover Preview, which was just updated to support games like Cyberpunk 2077 and a bunch of other games. If you've never seen Crossover, it's basically like Wine but with a really nice GUI and a way to set things up, and you can pay for it, and your payment towards it goes to support the developers who basically do all the Wine stuff. They also are helping Steam with their Steam Deck and Proton and all those compatibility layers. Box86 and Box64 and Box32 use some of those libraries in Proton to get games to play on Raspberry Pis and on other ARM computers. So it's very cool the work that they do, and what they've enabled now is you can just install Steam and install this stuff just with one script to install, and then that's basically it. You click install and you have this stuff. Obviously you have to buy the games. If you already have the games, you could just play them on your ARM computers, but really, how does it work? First of all, Steam works just great on here. I mean, this computer has 128 CPU cores, so it better work great. But the games, it's hit or miss. A game like Portal 2 runs great, very smooth, sound is good. It's a tiny bit choppy sometimes under this setup. And I should mention that I'm running an NVIDIA 4080 Super on this machine. Now I'm running that because I'm also testing this with AI models and things like that. That's way overkill for the state of the translation layers right now. On the Minisform MSR1, which I was just testing on the Jeff Geerling channel, that computer has an NVIDIA A2000, a laptop GPU that's put into a desktop basically, and that's a very much more compact build. You could get that whole thing put together for like $600-700 versus this thing is a little bit more like a workstation. So this is all fun and games, the testing that I'm doing here. But the fact that these games work now, especially newer games like Cyberpunk 2077, which is a little choppy, 12 to 14 frames per second here. It's a little choppy, but it's kind of playable. I also tested it on my Mac Mini M4 Pro at home, and on that computer it was getting 24 to 30 frames per second with high ray tracing support turned on. And on here it will run with ray tracing. The funny thing is, even if you downrate all the settings down to like, 1080p or 720p, it's still going to run about the same rate because there's a lot of different bottlenecks that have to be fixed after you just get a game running on here. I've also downloaded other games, like I downloaded Portal with RTX, and it's really funny what happens when you're running around in there. You actually see, is it Shell? Is that her name? You see her like eyelashes and her mouth and stuff, and when you're running, her body kind of blips in and out. So this stuff isn't perfect, but the fact that it works is awesome. And I know you're going to ask, of course it runs Crysis. I've also gotten Doom running on here. Everything on here works fine, but some things are more playable than others. So you can see Crysis, I'm probably getting 30-40 frames per second. I can't get the frames per second counter to show on it, so I can't show you exactly, but things are mostly working. Once it works, you can optimize things, you can find where there's bugs and fix them. And once it's up in Wine, I think it's in Wine 10 now, these fixes, they can kind of percolate to other things. This Crossover Preview is using something called FEX. There's the two things that I've used in the past for ARM emulation of gaming is FEX, and then Box86, Box64, and now Box32. Those are just translation layers that translate calls on ARM over to, or translate calls from like Windows into something that the ARM system on Linux can run. And that's also basically how Proton works if you're running an AMD computer, translating Windows to Linux. But then there's also the added layer of x86 to ARM on these machines. But somebody also asked me, like, why does any of this matter? It's obviously a less playable experience than even if you bought, like, if I just bought a similar MS-01 with an AMD CPU, or if I bought a Framework laptop or whatever kind of small PC, you're going to get actually a little bit better experience, and you don't have to deal with like the translation layers and Crossover or Wine or setting all that stuff up yourself. So what's the point? Well, the point is that if you can do this, anybody that has an ARM PC can actually use it for gaming that they couldn't do before, so that's a cool thing. And there's already millions of ARM desktops out there in the world, and there will be more. Another thing that I like is if you have, this is a newer graphics card, this is the B580, which I'm going to release a video on the Raspberry Pi on it very soon. But this is the B580. If you have an older graphics card, like let's say you upgraded your computer to this from an older AMD RX 580 or some older GPU that's practically worthless. It can't do AI stuff, so it's not going crazy on the used market. You could take that and put it in a GPU dock, plug it into one of these systems, and have some fun with it. Like, that's a way to keep using your old tech. If you wanted to have a little, basically like a little console setup to run old PC games, you can do that with like a Raspberry Pi, or with a rock chip board, or with one of these guys. And it's not the best value in the world if you're buying this stuff new, but if you have something laying around and you want to repurpose it, that's a way to repurpose it. I'm not going to sugarcoat things though. There's a reason this is called Crossover Preview and not just Crossover. There's still some bugs to iron out. Sometimes I was having issues where the screen would kind of show up off the screen and you couldn't actually go in and play the game. One time with Crysis, it would display full screen, but I couldn't control anything, so all I could do is open it and quit it. I already mentioned the issues with Portal with RTX, seeing Chell's face. It was kind of funny, but it also was a little bit hard to play. Sometimes I'd have issues with audio. Sometimes, it's funny, I probably spent an hour just trying to reinstall Ubuntu on this Thelio Astra, because sometimes the firmware on ARM, even though it uses UEFI and it uses a standard BIOS and all that kind of stuff now, there's still quirks sometimes, especially if you're using this high-end stuff. It's like server motherboards, and server motherboards behave a lot differently than consumer motherboards. And sometimes just getting it to boot up or getting it to display on the right monitor can be a challenge. But slowly over time, ARM has been getting better about it. The problem is, like, besides Apple, ARM is not, it's great on the low end and it's great on the high end. But there's this middle ground, like all the good value stuff. And the MSR one was close to that. The Orion 06 was close to that. But we're not quite there. However, if you are an ARM developer, or if you're an ARM enthusiast like I am, and you have these boards, this is just a way that you can use them to do more stuff. So in that sense, I love this, and I'm excited to see what else they do. At some point, I might do a bigger video on the Thelio Astra and the upgrade with the 4080 Super. And also, you might notice I'm using this, what is this keyboard? Let me see. I'm using the System 76's launch keyboard here. They shipped this to me a few months back, actually probably about a year ago now. And this thing is rock solid. It's a little bit interesting because it has the dual spacebar, which that's the one feature on here that I don't like. I just cannot get used to having the split spacebar there. It has a built-in USB hub in it with USB A and C ports on it, which is really great because then I can have like my mouse plugged in here, which is nice. I don't like using Bluetooth. I like using the little RF dongle. And if I want to boot the computer, I can do that through here as well. This does have power limitations, but it's also an RGB keyboard, which is fun, and I think there's a Raspberry Pi Pico inside. Anyway, so yeah, the System 76 launch keyboard. I've been testing a lot of keyboards for a long time, and I've never made a video about any of them. So let me know in the comments if you think that my thoughts, as somebody who's not a keyboard person, but who types a heck of a lot, if you think my thoughts on that would be worth doing a full video, either on the main channel or here or whatever. Anyway, Level 2 Jeff, I'm just rambling now, and I will talk to you again soon.